Hello, everybody. Welcome to Classless Conditions. This is a podcast where I talk everything politics and new media. I am your host, Michael Classy. It's a crazy world we live in today, folks. It's almost impossible to escape this craze, whether you're experiencing it in public or on social media. In this era of media consumption, it's become increasingly difficult to escape from just overexposure to a lot of issues. However, it's also become increasingly easy to get exposed and connect with key figureheads of public policy issues. Two individuals that come to mind are Ted Cruz and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who are two Congress people who have a big following on these new media websites, and they connect with a wide and big variety of people. And while it is great, it could be great to have this high level of communication with our representatives, it can cause a lot of legitimate problems. And in this podcast today, we are going to be discussing these problems with a focus on how specifically sites like Twitter curate and perpetuate a lot of these problems that we are currently seeing. This is actually a really interesting time to be doing a podcast. It's really a pivotal time in our history. We're seeing a crazy uptick of mass shootings and gun violence in the country. We are experiencing one of the biggest worldwide heat waves that we've ever experienced. Good luck to all my European brothers and sisters right now. And we are also dealing with one of the most egregious stripping of women's rights that has ever happened in our history, with the overturning of Roe v. Wade by the highest court in our land. Many preconceived notions about our country right now are being tested. And a lot of these topics that are being contested by both sides, right in the middle is Twitter, one of the biggest media giants that exists today. And I mentioned Ted Cruz and AOC, so we're actually going to continue using them as examples. Both people have very large Twitter followings. Ted Cruz sits at 5.2 million followers, where AOC actually sits at 13.2 million followers, so quite a bit more, but two of the biggest figureheads on both the Republican and Democratic sides. Their public outreach is then just massive. Ted Cruz and AOC both can reach a large swath of people, especially with the amount of times that they're retweeted by other people that are like-minded. So really, they're reaching much more than 5.2 and 13.2 million people. And this exposure to a lot of the issues pushed by both of these candidates will have a significant impact on public policy. The problem with this is that overexposure to ideas that you tend to agree with or are similar to your ideas can actually trap you in your own ideology, which is really problematic. Brian Ott and Robert Mack actually discussed this topic in their piece on critical media studies. To them, ideology is something that can both shape and constrain our beliefs and behaviors. So, for example, if you're a conservative user of Twitter and you follow minds like Ted Cruz, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, maybe even Joe Rogan, your ideology is going to be focused on those views that people share if you're an avid user of new media. So when you're going to look at other people who share different ideologies, there's going to be a huge clash, and you're not going to get a lot of information from the other side because you already have such devoted beliefs to yours. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to look at an example of Ted Cruz and AOC giving some speeches about the Green New Deal. And we're going to look at how they're able to cover the same topic in very different ways and construe different policy options from the same concept and the Green New Deal. So right here, we have Ted Cruz.
Over the past 15 months, we've seen inflation grow higher than at any time in the last 40 years. Perhaps the most painful driver of inflation has been the skyrocketing cost of gasoline at the pump. When Joe Biden took the oath of office, the average retail price of gasoline was $2.38 a gallon. Today, it is $4.23 a gallon. In some parts of the country, the price has crossed $6 a gallon. This was not an accident. It was not an unintended side effect, nor was it principally the result of the war in Ukraine. This was the result of the Green New Deal zealots in the Biden administration.
So Ted Cruz essentially just blamed the supporters of the Green New Deal and the Democrats as these zealots for the reason why we're seeing a huge uptick in our gas prices. Obviously, there are some policies that the Democrats might push that have an influence on gas prices. But to say that the Democrats themselves are solely responsible for the uptick in gas prices is completely misconstrued. The topic is just much too complicated to blame it on a single party of people. So right now, we are going to get into AOC. This is her addressing Congress about the Green New Deal, and she actually read the entire bill from the floor of Congress. These are her closing remark and her closing statements about why she thinks the Green New Deal is important.
We have prioritized the pursuit of profit at any and all human and environmental cost. And I humbly ask my colleagues and my country to question our priorities for once, because our priorities have led to an unprecedented amount of income inequality, to millions of people living in poverty, and many more that feel unstable in their economic life. So please, as a moral, economic, and political prerogative, I humbly ask our country to care for our planet.
So she's covering the Green New Deal, arguing that morally, politically, and economically, we should support the planet to just positively influence all of those concepts. Obviously, a very distinctive and different view of the Green New Deal than Ted Cruz. AOC is portraying a lot of the potential positive side effects of the Green New Deal, where Ted Cruz is using it as an example of a party that is power grabbing and influencing gas prices that are hurting the American people. So taking that same exact issue and really portraying it in two very, very different ways. The reason why it's important to talk about, and the reason why I had those two clips there in the first place, is because it's important to understand that when people understand these issues that are the same in different ways, it's going to have a legitimate effect on the voting booths. People who see the Green New Deal as problematic are not going to vote for people who are in support of the Green New Deal, even though these people are understanding the Green New Deal on two completely different levels. So as I said before, these are very popular Congress people. And what ends up happening as their bases understand their views of the issue is that they become very diatomically opposed, and it becomes almost impossible to have any middle ground for those two groups of people. This happens in almost every issue we're currently seeing in politics here in the US, where these two groups are so opposed and so trustless of each other that they're not able to get anything done and not able to actually get that middle ground. So what we're going to do now is I did a little data digging. I pulled up some tweets that I found interesting to go over pertaining to individuals: Ted Cruz, Bernie Sanders, and Matt Walsh. We're first going to go over Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders and just the difference of the things that they cover in the same time period. And then we're going to get into Matt Walsh and discussion of doxa. So first, here is a group of tweets that I've collected. This one is from Ted Cruz on July 20th, which is today. And he is talking about how an increased investment and more law enforcement will actually help prevent mass shootings. He is making this argument and pushing it to all of the people that are following him on Twitter. In the same day, he reposts and replies to another tweet talking about his view on the Indiana shooting in a mall and how a citizen who was concealed carrying actually ended up shooting and killing the potential shooter. So here, Ted Cruz is really pushing for Second Amendment rights and gun rights, especially concealed carry, as a way to help stopping these mass shootings. And this is the policy that he really is pushing right now. Comparatively, pretty starkly, is Bernie Sanders, who in the same time period, just on July 19th, is talking about our heat waves. Not a single mention of these heat waves has been mentioned by Ted Cruz in the same time span. Bernie Sanders is currently talking about the heat waves in Europe and the ones we're currently facing here in the United States as examples of climate change and how important it is we deal with these increased temperatures in order to be able to keep the sanctity of our health here in the country, as older people are very susceptible to death from overheating. The reason why I wanted to bring these two up is not necessarily because either candidate is providing information that is incorrect or faulty. It's just to exemplify how bases of both of these representatives can become construed of worldviews based on the problems that are being introduced. A supporter of Ted Cruz is obviously going to be much more interested in gun rights because that's the media that they're being exposed to, whereas someone who supports Bernie Sanders is going to be more concerned with the problem of climate change because that's what they're exposed to. So they're two very legitimate policy options and avenues, but people are only focusing on, the ones that they're exposed to, which makes it seem like these two different groups of people have very different morals and also huge political differences, which is not always the case. However, there is cases of misinformation and people accepting this misinformation as fact, which is even worse and detrimental to our political system. I wanted to bring up Matt Walsh because of this. He is known misinformationist. This is his banner on Twitter. He is a self-described theocratic fascist, best-selling children's author, women's studies scholar, and biologist. I can tell you the last three are him being a little snarky and ironic, but he is a self-described fascist, which is, take that as you will. So this is a tweet he tweeted today. He has this theory that mental illnesses aren't true. It's just people like making it up. He is referring to in this tweet a study that was conducted pertaining to chemical imbalances in people's brain. So what he said here is that these chemical imbalance in the theory of depression is a myth. I will gladly accept apologies from any of those people now that I have been proven correct. Just thought I'd put that offer out. And he's referring to this one study that didn't even really have any significance when it comes to proving or disproving the effects of depression. The article itself is about how individuals are being described too much of these medications, even for just minor forms of depression, which is essentially boosting the big pharma industry. Of course, he's referring to an article by the Daily Mail, which is not regarded as a typically reliable source of information. And even in this article in the Daily Mail, they aren't even saying a lot of the same talking points that Matt Walsh is saying. So he's completely misconstruing all of this information. And he's pushing this talking point on all of his supporters. Right here is a very shocking video that he posted 20 hours ago. So yesterday, July 19th, about how these heat waves we're currently facing. It's just summertime.
So it's July, excessive heat. I'm not even sure what that means. Excessive. I mean, first of all, isn't that sort of in the eye of the beholder here? Isn't that a kind of a subjective? For me, excessive heat.
Excessive heat being in the eye of beholder, without, I mean, literally excessive heat meaning heat capable of killing people. So totally just brushing off that whole excessive heat business. What is excessive heat? It's just, let's continue.
Over like 70. I consider that excessive. But it's just it's a strange way of phrasing it when you're talking about weather. Excessive. Like walking out of your house. This is hey, come on, weather. This is excessive. Take it easy a little bit. And the way that they're framing this, talking about the number of people who are experiencing, quote, excessive heat, that's clever. I mean, it's a clever trick that will fool you if you're very stupid. So I guess it's not a very clever trick, but it is a trick because, of course, the more people you have in the world, then the more people who are going to experience hot temperatures. So you could say, certainly, that billions more people this year will experience hot temperatures than experienced hot temperatures 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago.
He's arguing that because there's more people in the world, of course, there's going to be more people experiencing hot temperatures without recognizing that more people are proportionally having these extreme temperatures in areas where these temperatures usually aren't extreme. So he's really just having this straw man argument. To people who support him might be like, oh yeah, like this is totally legit and makes sense. So he's pushing a lot of really problematic ideas right now.
That's obviously correct because there are a lot more people around to experience temperatures in the first place. But heat in the summer, all the same, whether there are 7 billion people on Earth or one person on Earth, heat in the summer is not shocking. And in fact, it'd be much more alarming if the summer came and went and no one ever broke a sweat.
So to Matt Walsh, extreme temperatures aren't a problem because it's the summertime and it's supposed to be hot. Quite literally the argument that he just said. And you might be thinking like, oh, well, Mike, this is all fringe. Like nobody actually believes in these things that he's saying. Matt Walsh actually works for the Daily Wire, which is the 6th biggest and most popular podcast network in the entire world. It is owned by Ben Shapiro, another conservative pundit. And it, in the past 3 months, actually had 28.7 million single viewers of their podcast, so reaching a huge amount of people. And the problem with this is what Matt is essentially doing here is establishing doxa of untrue information. So according to both Brian Ott and Robert Mack, doxa represents knowledge which is beyond question or common sense. So what Matt Walsh is doing here is he's convincing his supporters of the truthfulness of all of this information and saying it in a way where like, this is just common sense. It's the summertime. It's supposed to be hot. These climate scientists are crazy because they've obviously never experienced a hot summer, and it's subjective what's hot. Every person has a different definition of heat. When you explain it in this way, it seems reasonable, and people and the viewers really do eat it up. And when they go to the polls and they go vote, they're not going to be seeing these issues as extreme as they actually are because of people like Matt Walsh, who dumb down these issues and make them seem unproblematic using misconstrued or false information. This is important because in a recent study, it was concluded that only 10% of all the news on Twitter is from legitimate news sources, and 41% of all the news that is viewed on Twitter is from fake news media sites. Currently, only 58% of Democrats and 18% of Republicans reported, according to Gallup, trusting mainstream media news sources. So as the increase of this distrust continues to develop and more people go to social media for their information, there's going to be an increased use of fake news sites, and people are going to vote based on their understandings of policy from fake news. Public policy in the US and the rest of the world really has the opportunity to never be the same because of this. And it's important that if we're going to avoid this problem, that people become better consumers of new media. So I wanted to end this on a positive note. I have some tips and tricks to become more responsible for your media consumption. First of all, make sure you follow people who you disagree with. I probably look at a 50-50 makeup of my Twitter followers in terms of political pundits of conservatives and more liberals. Just because I like to see how they're opposing each other. It's really important to get both sides. Don't be lazy. Number 2, read more than just the headline that you're seeing and get context. If you just saw that Matt Walsh headline and you are a blind supporter of his, you're going to go, oh, so depression is fake. Cool, locked in. That is not the case. You have to read the article and actually understand what it said. 3, recognize conflicting information and do your research. So when you follow all these people and you're reading their articles, you're going to find a lot of information that seems in opposition and is in opposition of each other. You need to do the research and be responsible, especially on issues that you care the most about, to have an accurate understanding so that when you vote, you're voting with a clear conscience and knowing that the information that you are voting on is correct. To end the podcast, I just want to share a nonprofit organization that I think is doing an excellent job in literacy of our news. So this is News Literacy Project. It is a nonprofit organization that deals with news literacy. It is a nonpartisan education nonprofit that is building national movement to advance the practice of news literacy throughout American society, creating better informed, more engaged, and more empowered individuals. They have a bunch of great information here talking about how to increase your news media literacy skills, and they have a bunch of programs and reading to do that is just really helpful in understanding why it's important to be literate in the news that you are consuming. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for tuning in. I had a lot of fun during this episode, the first episode of this podcast. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Start to check yourself before you wreck yourself for your news media consumption, and have a great rest of your summer. Thank you all so much.